The first frost always smelled of death. It slid in under the doorframe like a thief, kissed the water pail until it cracked, and crept into your bones while you slept. You'd wake before dawn and see your breath hovering like a ghost in the dark. By then, you knew it was too late. The cold had settled. It wasn't going anywhere. When I was 12, my sister Anna died in her sleep the first week of November. We didn't even notice until we tried to wake her for morning chores, and her skin was stiff as cloth. My mother said it was God's mercy, that maybe he took her before the real hunger came. I never forgave him for that. I want to ask you something before we go further. Not as a peasant, but as a person. What would you do if the only way to survive the winter was to eat less so your little brother could eat more? Would you do it without complaint, or would you count every bite? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm curious how many of you would have made it through just one winter in my boots. I was born in a village with no name, not really. We called it the Hollow, because the land dipped just enough to trap the fog every morning. Mud roads, thatched roofs, goats tied to tree stumps. If you climbed the eastern hill, you could see the tower of the local monastery on a clear day. I never got closer than that. We didn't own land. No one really did, not peasants like us. We worked what the Lord allowed, gave him a share of what we grew, and hoped he wouldn't notice if a bit of grain stayed in our own sacks. My father woke with the birds. I always wondered how he did it, just knew when the sky was about to shift. No bells, no clocks, just instinct and burden. He'd pull on his wool tunic, holey at the elbows, and wrap his belt 3 times around his waist because it helped with hunger. Said it tricked the belly. We had a routine, always the same, every season, every year. You milk the cow if she's still giving, feed the chickens if the fox hasn't got them, stack the dung for burning, break the ice at the well. We saved the clean water for drinking, but even that tasted of iron. Everything else we boiled. The bread was coarse and brown, full of barley and chaff. My mother mixed it with wild onion if she had any left. We didn't use plates, just our hands and wooden bowls passed down from dead relatives. I still remember the splinters in my tongue from the cracked rim of mine. We wore the same clothes every day. You patched them, re-dyed them with walnut or woad, made them last until they fell off your body. My underdress was my sister's before me, and hers before that. It smelled of smoke no matter how many times I rinsed it. But it wasn't always terrible. I need you to understand that. Spring was kind sometimes. The earth softened under your boots. The lambs bleated loud and wobbled after their mothers. I'd sit under the birch tree behind the smith's hut and chew on sourdock while watching the bees chase each other. That was my idea of joy. And in summer, even with the flies and the stink of slop, we had music. Fiddles, drums made from goat gut. I danced barefoot in the dust with my cousins while the older folk drank ale that tasted like rotten apples and didn't care who was watching. For those few weeks, we could almost forget what waited at the edge of the year. But winter was a curse. By mid-November, the earth went stiff and the sky turned sullen. No more mushrooms to forage, no eggs from the hens, just cold wind and black soil. We ate turnips, salted pork if we'd managed to preserve any. I chewed pine bark once. People say it's bitter. They're right. But if you grind it down and mix it with snow, it gives your mouth something to do. That matters more than you'd think. I watched my mother steal eggs once. From the manor hen house, I didn't tell a soul. She wrapped them in her apron like jewels and boiled them in silence. She gave mine to my youngest brother, said I was strong, that I could wait. She was wrong. I cried later where no one could see. There were moments I hated the quiet, when hunger gnawed so deep you couldn't sleep, when your fingers cracked from cold and bled onto the spinning wool, when the wind made the house creak like it might fall in on itself. You'd sit by the fire and stare into it too long. That's when the thoughts came. I once thought about stealing a rabbit from the priest's trapline. Never did. I was too afraid of damnation. Or maybe I was just afraid of being caught. Still, I dreamed about that rabbit for days. Roasted over flame. Skin peeled back. Fat dripping into the coals. And then came the year of the sickness. They called it the sweat. It came like thunder, fast, brutal and cruel. You'd wake up with heat in your cheeks, and by dusk you were gone. The village buried 10 in a week. We ran out of shovels, just used sticks and hands. My father died on a Tuesday. I remember because it was bread day and he hadn't touched his share. That's how I knew it was serious. We wrapped him in linen and laid him out in the cold. Couldn't bury him for 2 more days. The ground was frozen solid. I didn't cry then. Not because I wasn't sad, but because crying made your face wet, and wet meant cold, and cold meant death. That's the math of peasant life. You learn it young, or not at all. I was 16 when I took over the ploughing. My brothers were too small, the ox was sick, so I strapped the yoke across my back and walked behind the plough while my uncle cursed the soil. My hands blistered, then bled, then healed into something else, harder. There's pride in that, not glory. Not the kind they write songs about, but pride. Quiet, thick like mud. You earn your own survival with every turn of the blade, and love still happened. Even there. I met Thomas near the river bend. He was tall, silent, and had hands like oak roots. I liked the way he whistled when he worked, like he was making music for the worms. We shared a blanket that winter. That's all it took. No ring, no feast. Just two bodies pressed close enough to keep the dark out. We held each other like kindling. I lost our first baby, then our second. It happens more than people say. We buried them in the woods near the frost-split stones. I made a cradle from woven reeds just to leave something behind. Eventually we had a daughter, healthy, red-cheeked, loud. She screamed at the wind and laughed at the fire. I named her Mira after my mother. She made me believe again that maybe we weren't born only to endure. I told her stories by candlelight, of trees that whispered secrets, of wolves that guarded lost children, of a life beyond the fields where the air didn't hurt your lungs. She believed me, even when I didn't believe myself, and in my old age the hunger came again. It always does. But this time I was ready. I knew how to stretch soup with roots, how to dry leaves for tea, how to mend shoes with pig gut. I taught Mira these things, and she taught her own girl after that. Now I sit by the fire and watch her comb the child's hair, and I think of all we've buried and all we've kept alive. And I wonder if you, sitting there behind your glass screen, warm in a room where light comes with the flip of a switch, can still feel what it cost us. Not gold, not glory, but grit. Grit and grief and love that doesn't ask to be noticed. So if you've listened this far, I ask you one last thing. Don't forget us. Not the peasants, not the nameless, not the ones who slept in straw and woke to frostbite and still managed to sing. We lived, we mattered. We made the world warm enough to go on.